Hi, I am Professor Amitabh Banerjee, author of Pandemic Third Eye. I will be discussing chapter 22 of this book today, conflicting claims on efficacy of masks. This is just one example I had taken in this book to show how organizations like the CDC and other esteemed organizations were making U-turns and sometimes giving wrong statements. I mean, amounting to almost actually misinformation. Whereas other scientists, even if they presented some alternative views with data, they were labeled as spreading, they were accused of spreading misinformation. So, well, the CDC itself was doing it. And with the example of mask, I have illustrated this. Masks have been 80% effective in stopping the spread of coronavirus, says the CDC. It gave a statement that it is 80% effective in spreading, in stopping the spread of coronavirus, the CDC. 80%. Even the vaccine is not 80% effective. Other medical researches show a modest efficacy of 11% or no efficacy at all, whereas proper randomized trials did not show any efficacy. In social interactions, nuanced deviations from the truth or pro-social lies can occasionally tide over a thorny situation. You may, in some social interactions, you may use subtle lies to tide over a situation or make people compliant when the things are really important to comply with. But here, there were no evidence, and then such blatant lies, extending this to science can bring about its nemesis. So this is one of the examples of nemesis of science in the pandemic. And practiced by haloed scientific institutions, these can result in irreparable harm to their credibility and reputation. It has taken a beating, the reputation of such institutions. During the pandemic, such deviations from evidence-based practice became rather too frequent on the part of reputable institutions like the Center for Disease Control, CDC, Atlanta, USA, the United States, and Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and others. Misinformation from esteemed institutions which had been acknowledged as the final authority by scientists, researchers, and the general public can have devastatingly adverse impact on the current and future pandemics. It can lead to irreparable erosion of trust among the general public in science and scientific institutions, and also cause dismay and disillusionment, if not a little embarrassment, among practicing researchers. It did cause embarrassment to honest researchers. These misguiding signals also have the potential to push research priorities down the wrong path. In English art and literature, Shakespeare, or the Bard, as he was known, is said to have captured the whole gamut of the human experience, including deceit, greed, and pathos, using melodrama to appeal to the emotion of the masses. In Julius Caesar, one of his well-known tragedies, Caesar's last words were, "Et tu, Brute, then fall Caesar," which translate to, "You too, Brutus, then fall Caesar," as Caesar's assassins included his best and trusted friend Brutus. Brutus, his best friend, even he betrayed him. So then Caesar had nothing to look forward to. Then fall Caesar were his last words. Indian mainstream art and culture too captures this vast canvas through current medium of mass entertainment, the movies. A song in a classic Hindi movie captures the current state of affairs in medical science. In this song, there are many allegories to this situation. For instance, there is a stanza which goes, I'll just narrate a few words from this song in a famous Hindi movie. मझधार में नैया डोले तो माझी पार लगाए माझी जो नाव डुबोए उसे कौन बचाए, which translates to in the midstream when the boat is wobbling, the boatman saves it from going down, but when the boatman himself sinks the boat, who will save it? This was the situation. This is captured in this song, that the person who is supposed to protect you, he or she betrays you, then who is going to protect you? तो मझधार में जब नैया डोले तो माझी पार लगाए, माझी जो नाव डुबाए उसे कौन बचाए. The pandemic exposed the cracks in our public health and regulatory systems. USA being the bellwether of global trends, misinformation and misdemeanors on part of those entrusted to safeguard public health and ensure safety of interventions for controlling pandemics is cause for great concern and a threat to humanity. During the pandemic, the CDC director tweeted that masks cut down transmission of the novel coronavirus by 80%. This statement, which flies in the face of evidence coming from the CDC director, did immense harm to the credibility of this august institution. CDC Atlanta used to be the last word in public health protocols, and this highly inaccurate statement had the potential to undermine the trust of public health professionals in the CDC. Far lesser deviations from the truth by lesser mortals are labeled as fake news by the mainstream consensus and censored. The scientific evidence of protection by mask is that cloth masks do not check transmission of the virus, and surgical masks offer very modest protection to the tune of 11%. A Danish randomized controlled mask study did not find any benefit of using surgical masks, while a very large cluster randomized mask study from Bangladesh involving more than 3 lakh people found that cloth masks offer no protection, while surgical masks reduce transmission by mere 11%. And the surgical mask also you are supposed to change every 6 hours. You can't keep on using it as the common person uses it. It may be spreading, in fact, more infection than preventing any. That same mask is getting dirty, and I'm just worried in the second wave. There's a lot of black fungus and mucormycosis with the summer sweat and other things. Perspiration may be infecting the masks. I mean, making them highly contaminated. Such misinformation can be hazardous. The misleading statement of 80% efficacy by mask could well lull many into a false sense of security. Overestimating the protection offered, many may neglect other behaviors such as hand washing and avoiding crowds. This can be hazardous, particularly for the old and vulnerable. Masks not used properly can be extremely hazardous. In hot, humid weather, sweat and saliva can wet the mask within a couple of hours, providing ideal soil for growth of other pathogens and fungi more virulent than the novel coronavirus. A hypothesis can be proposed that the high incidence of mucormycosis or black fungi during the second wave in hot and humid summer of India might have been due to improperly used soil masks, besides use of steroids and underlying diabetes. This is a topic for research which was never explored. This may have been due to the belief that masks are holy and sacrosanct, the way they were advocated by people in high places such as the director of CDC without any evidence, rather against all evidence. Another clumsy and amateurish action by CDC was the propaganda that vaccine-induced immunity was superior to immunity after recovery from natural infection based on a highly flawed study. This study was an observational one on a sample of just 89 unrepresentative patients in various hospitals and has been criticized severely by serious researchers. On the other hand, real-world studies on very large sample sizes in Israel and Cleveland Clinic, USA, among others, have established beyond reasonable doubt that immunity after natural infection confers at least 13 times more robust immunity compared to vaccine-induced immunity. The CDC had to eat its words later when events overtook the false narrative and had to concede that natural immunity was superior to vaccine-induced immunity. Very reluctantly it had. And it is very relevant for a country like India where more than 70-80% had already natural immunity from natural infection. when the vaccine coverage was just 5 to 10%. So there was no need, particularly with Covishield, which now is coming out. It has been withdrawn now, but some harm must have been done already because this was affecting the adverse events from Covishield. AstraZeneca was mostly in younger people, and in many countries it was suspended in younger population. And we had a majority younger population. Demographically, we are a young population. Unfortunate. The FDA too was complicit in acts of omission, if not commission. According to an investigative article in the prestigious British Medical Journal, there were gross irregularities in one of the centers conducting the Pfizer vaccine trials. The director of the center reported the sloppy quality control during the vaccine trials, such as untrained vaccinators, poor follow up of adverse events, unblinded participants, and other lapses to the FDA. This regulatory body, even on being informed about these lapses, did not take any action. To add insult to injury, the whistleblower was summarily sacked by her employers. So these are the actual vaccine trials were going on. Pfizer supervisor, when reporting it, she was sacked. And it is reported in the British Medical Journal. Such acts of omissions and commissions by august bodies like the CDC and regulatory authorities like the FDA echoes the pathos of the bard, and that in the classic music song, questioning who will save us from drowning. If the boatman himself sinks the boat, add to CDC, add to FDA, then fall science. Or Maji jo now डूबे उसे कौन बचाए. So we are in very dark times. Hopeful we have faced a second restoration like the Middle Ages. We are in a dark where the science is disappeared, when the science has fallen badly, when the institutions like the FDA and the CDC has been betraying the people and the world is following them blindly. Let us hope that there is a revival of science before the things are repeated in forthcoming pandemic and pandemic treaty. So that's all I have to. These things are very relevant even now after the pandemic because it's likely to be repeated in future so-called pandemics. Thank you.